Thank you for joining me. I am Giovanni Morzenti and I'm here to present my work, Stealth Consolidation, Market Power and Income Inequality. Does an increase in firm market power have an effect on the whole economy? And can it increase income inequality? There's been a recent debate on whether market power is increasing in the United States and on the dire consequences that this can have on resource allocation within the economy. However, there's no direct empirical evidence on the effect of market power on income inequality. And this is where my paper comes in. I'm going to identify exogenous variation in market power and their effect on the economy by exploiting instances of stealth consolidation in a dynamic factor model. This is a novel methodology that allows me to overcome limited data, and in particular, the fact that whenever a firm increases market power, it's impossible to identify all the actors that are affected, meaning the workers that operate in the firm and the owners that benefit from an increase in profits. Stealth consolidation is defined as a series of anti-competitive deals that go unnoticed by the antitrust authorities because they are small mergers. These mergers are considered trifle by the antitrust authorities, and so they are not inspected, but they can have dire consequences, and this is going to be shown in the rest of this paper. What are the mechanisms through which stealth consolidation affect income inequality? Well, they operate through market power, which is defined as the ability of a firm to influence the market so as to raise its profits in an anti-competitive way. A firm, when it increases market power, it will increase its markup and it will decrease its output so as to increase profits, and as a consequence, labor earnings of the workers operating in the firm will decrease. Since profits are increasing and a disproportionate amount of these profits is going to the rich part of the population, then the income of the rich will increase. On the other hand, the income of the poor, which is composed mainly by labor earnings, will decrease, and this will result in an increase in inequality. How can I identify a shock that represents stealth consolidation? First of all, I'm going to focus on stealth mergers, so these mergers that are small enough so that they are not inspected by the antitrust authorities. And then I'm going, as a source of variation, I'm going to exploit the difference between horizontal and non-horizontal mergers. Horizontal mergers are those mergers between firms operating in the same narrowly defined industries. These are firms that compete in the same product markets, and as a consequence, a mergers between these firms is most likely to be anti-competitive and to increase market power of these firms. In practice, I'm going to use the number of non-horizontal mergers as a control for the number of horizontal mergers, and then I'm going to use principal components computed from a large data set, including the distribution of markups and the distribution of income and labor earnings. I'm going to apply vector autoregressive methodologies to this dataset, which means that I'm going to regress these variables on past realizations of the same. And one of these linear regression is key to understand the identification strategy. And this is the regression of the number of horizontal mergers. I'm going to regress this number on the number of non-horizontal mergers, which will act as a control, and on the principal components representing the whole economy. Then I'm going to regress it on the lags and past realizations of these variables, and then the residual of this regression will be decomposed in several shocks, one of which is the market power shock. I choose this shock because it has a very particular property. It affects only the number of horizontal mergers contemporaneously, and it does not affect the other variables. As a consequence, this shock can be interpreted as an increase in the number of horizontal mergers with respect to the number of non-horizontal mergers. This shock will affect other variables in subsequent periods, but only through the effect that it has on the number of horizontal mergers. The results of this paper will be mainly in the form of impulse response functions. These are obtained by simulating the model for 40 periods or equivalently 10 years after the shock hits the economy. As we can see, the number of horizontal deals increase, and the increase is positive and significant also in subsequent periods. The other variables do not respond at time zero. This is by design. But then GDP decreases, as one would expect after a shock to market power, but the share of GDP that goes into profits will increase, and especially in the long run. The response of markups is again what one would expect after a shock to market power. We can see here that I plotted the response of the size of the distribution of markups, and in particular in light color, I plot higher the size, and in dark colors, I plot the response of lower the size. We can see that the entire distribution is shifting upwards, and that higher the size are responding more to this shock. Moving to households, I plot again the size of the distribution of income and labor earnings, and we can see that both in the short run and in the long run is the higher part of the distribution, the rich households that are gaining from this shock, while the poor households are losing. This will result in a strong increase in inequality in the short run, and also a positive and significant increase in inequality in the long run. And this is precisely what we see when we look at the response of Gini index computed for income and earnings. I also have several robustness checks of these results, but in conclusion, the main contribution of this work is the identification of a market power shock by exploiting stealth consolidation in a dynamic factor models. And results of this work show that after the shock, income and earnings inequality is increasing both in the short and in the long run. Here I report also quantifications of the effect of this shock. But in conclusion, I show that stealth consolidation results in an increase in income inequality. Thank you for your attention.